Bonnie is an animal researcher, environmentalist, understands what's beneath our feet. All right. And you're...
And I'm also noticing
that helps. Thanks, Bonnie. Bonnie's a researcher at Hamlin University, where my parents met, so I think that's a wonderful school. All right, well, let's welcome Bonnie Ploger.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm going to use a stool because I've got a little bit of a tremor when I stand. Doesn't interfere with rock climbing and running and anything except photography and bird watching. Get a little shaky. You need a microphone. Can people hear me okay? I'd rather not use a mic. Is that working for everyone? So, or yeah, you could sort of point it. It's just going to distort part of what will happen later. Is that going to work? Hopefully.
You can change your place.
I need to see this, so I'll be prepared. That's going to block the screen. Yeah. Are you having trouble hearing, or are you?
Over the course of the time.
I'm sure my voice will stay loud. I'm a lecturer. I've got a big mouth. Yeah.
That helps.
Is that okay? So it's interesting to. Oh, that's way too much, Mike. It's going to be a problem when I sing. Yeah. Can you down the level? Is that okay? Sorry for all the sound checking here. So it's interesting to follow a talk on Lyme disease because the whole premise of what I'm going to be talking about is about getting people out in the natural world and crawling through the bushes and lying on the dirt and so forth. And I am a great advocate of the flowers of sulfur, which I used in my graduate school days. I do right now also buy permethrin treated clothing. I know that's toxic for some people. It's been okay for me. I have ambiguous feelings about that because it is an environmental pollutant, but it also has worked really well for me, and I am outside all the time, and I'm in a yard that has deer and voles and mice and all the ingredients for Lyme, and my neighbors have had Lyme. And the one time that I did get Lyme was when I was in treated clothing, but I forgot to do anything about my socks, and it was right down at Minnehaha Springs, Creek, after a flood, and just walking down there, and 2 days later I was fortunate enough to have bullseye, and fortunate enough that it cleared. My tremor is way before all of that. So we were talking about the reasons that Lyme disease might be more common, and how the environment is changing. We're all full of toxins in the environment, in our bodies, in the wildlife. And in this time of global environmental crisis, we actually need more connection with the natural world in order to give us hope and to help us find solutions so that we and our environment can thrive. So raise your hand if you did this as a child. Did you ever build a fort or launch a homemade boat or something like that? Okay, great. Now most of you are not, there aren't any kids around right now, and I would bet that there'd be a little bit more variability in the answers if you were of the age of the college students that I often work with, or younger, because a lot of what's happening today is that because of fears of disease and of kidnapping and of all sorts of other things, parents aren't allowing their children to be outdoors as much, and the kids themselves are interested in their devices, and so they're not out as much for their own reasons as well. I certainly did these kinds of activities as a child, and I've continued this into adulthood, combining art and nature play into my artistic practice, and also in my scientific investigations and educational work. So I'm going to start with examples of my personal practice in combining art with nature. We had been in the intensive care unit for days. My brother, my 8-year-old nephew, and I, where Mom was in a coma dying. And on a break, we were desperate for green after days of antiseptic white walls and machines. So we went to a park. And while we were there, there was a big willow tree, something like this, with the leaves going all the way down to the ground, and it formed a kind of a room. And I said to him, let's build a nature museum. So we gathered objects, and he sorted and organized them into the room that was formed by the weeping willow boughs. And when we were done, he gave my brother and I a tour, and all three of us pointed out things that Grandma would have enjoyed seeing. A day or two later, with hope fading, we three walked a Seattle beach below a bluff. I discovered a clay deposit on the bluff and closed my eyes, and quickly I formed a shape that was the rounded form of my mom. I don't have a photo of that. I wasn't taking pictures at all during this period, but it might have looked something like that. And I placed that figure high up on a driftwood tree root. So if you've ever been in the Pacific Northwest, you see these massive, like yay-high roots of ancient trees. Some of them have been floating around in the Pacific for a long time. And I left it there. And as I was placing and leaving it, I said, please return to us, or be free. We lost my mother a few days later. So creating this outdoor museum and the figure of clay on the beach are just examples of my personal practice of combining art with nature. And this practice has shaped my 12 years of teaching biology at Hamlin and helped me find ways to help people take hope in a time of environmental crisis. Those art practices that I was doing for myself and for my family were important to me for my own well-being and my own sense of hope. And it was critical that those be in the outdoors. I have very strong feelings about the environmental crisis. And I grew up in the Seattle area, and today the forests of the mountains of the Cascades are dying from beetle attacks, bark beetle attacks. The beetles are surviving because the winters are warm. There's warmer and not killing the larvae. There's a little bit of hope to take in this, in that the beetles have, through history, had attacks like this every, I think it's like 500 or 1,000 years. So the forest will return in some form, but it's going to be different. And another thing I did in those mountains a lot was that I caught frogs. And the pond I visited with my nephew before my mom died a pond where it used to be black with pollywogs up in Mount Rainier National Park. And when my nephew and I were there, at around the right time of year, we saw a cascade frog here, a cascade frog there, sort of scattered widely around the pond, but very few tadpoles. Frogs globally are going extinct or declining in numbers, or as in Minnesota, becoming deformed because of various problems, including a fungus that they're more susceptible to because of toxins in the environment and climate change. So I had a lot of sense of personal loss around the environmental crisis. And when I first tried to teach a conservation biology course, I kind of unconsciously sabotaged it and made sure I wouldn't have to, I didn't do it awarely, but I taught in such a way in the third year of my Hamlin teaching that there was no way anybody was going to ask me to teach conservation for a long time. And that was just fine with me. The missing piece in that course was that it was all intellect. There was no emotion. There was no connection to the feelings. And the path for me of getting into teaching conservation, which I now do very successfully, began with artistic practice for myself. I started making art out of natural materials that related to my feelings about the disappearance of frogs and the loss of wetland habitats. Wetlands, which have been the inspiration of my animal behavior research. I studied egrets and frogs and herons. So this presentation is going to be a tiny bit of background information, some of which I just gave. And then mostly it's going to be some activities that I do with students and with people who do my public workshops for artists and others, activities that you might want to do yourself. And then at the end, an example of my personal practice in the form of a performance that related from a scientific expedition that I did some years ago. So first, a little bit of information, some of which I already gave. So, geologists divide the Earth's history into these things called epochs that are time periods that begin and end with major extinctions, typically along with some sort of climate change. And we have been in the Holocene epoch, so that started, it includes the age of mammals at the time when the indigenous people here in North America were hunting woolly mammoth and horses and things like that. But recently, scientists have increasingly been adopting a new term for the time period that started as people began to have big impacts on the Earth. And many scientists are now referring to what we live in as the Anthropocene. Named anthro means human or man. And the name is to denote that the cause of this mass extinction and climate change event has to do with our human actions. There's still debate about when the Anthropocene started. So, a problem is that today, while we are facing this huge loss, which causes emotional loss for those of us who are connected to the natural world, but also causes stress and degrades human health, as we've been talking about in the last talk, through changes in ecosystems and disease organisms, pollution, drought, floods, food scarcity, all of those things. Today we're facing this crisis at a time when we are increasingly disconnected from the natural world. And yet, researchers have found that connection to the natural world is the single best predictor of whether people will work to conserve, have a conservation ethic, vote for people who would have that ethic, And so we have this problem of these two things happening at the same time, a crisis and part of the solution being not there as much because of all the disconnection that we have. And so to heal ourselves and the earth, we need to rekindle a passion for nature and engage in the hope this brings. And that's the focus of my environmental teaching. So since childhood, I'm going to share an activity that I tried with others somewhat successfully, but not entirely, and then show my solutions to it. Since childhood, I've gone outside and found special spots in nature, climbing up a tree in the backyard when I was upset, crawling under rhododendrons. Have other people as children? I see nods, yeah. So places where you find peace when you're upset or go to just enjoy. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll help students feel nature connections and hopefully encourage conservation and also improve their health, decrease stress and all. So I started taking students into the woods to find special spots. And one of the first times I did it was right before exams with my animal behavior class on the day that they had pulled all-nighters to get their final paper in. And we just wandered around, we explored the senses. They lay on their backs for a while in silence. But the last thing I did is I gave them this assignment. I told them first, if you sit quietly in the woods or fields or whatever, animals that were disturbed by your revival will relax. And this has been my personal experience. And if you stay longer, then you're likely to have a close encounter with wildlife. And I've had some amazing close encounters that I don't have time to share with you. And some of the students responded wonderfully. All of them really liked that they had been outside and such a different pace right before exams. So they found that very relaxing. But I was surprised that some of them were fearful when they were doing this assignment. So they were wandering alone in directions that felt right and then just staying in place and looking and observing. And so I thought, this is a problem. So I added in art activities because art had helped me in dealing with my own emotions. So maybe it would help the students with their fear. So what I started to do is a variety of activities that I've been developing over the years. I'm going to go through these three: intuitive photography, special spot creations, and clay animals in the landscape. And so all of these involve first wandering around in whatever direction feels right and noticing small things that catch your eye. In the photography, you then photograph up close. And I did this in China, and one of the students got in really close to this lizard and later told me she was really afraid of it. But the assignment had been to get in close. And by getting in close, she found it was really fascinating. So that close looking, we explore, we look, and the photography kind of makes a little barrier between them as well. Another activity is a variation on the special spot. People wander again in whatever direction feels right, and as they wander, they gather things that catch their eye, and when they get to the spot that they want, they create something, and it could be tiny, or it could be large. And after they're there, you stay still for a time and just be. And then the last step is that the whole group goes around and visits each creation. And the pattern of doing this is that each person writes down a word or a phrase in response to the art and then shares it with the creator, and then the creator says some things about why they picked the place, the materials, what aspects of themselves were suggested by aspects of the piece. And so I want you to now just take a moment. This is a student's artwork. And just look at it a moment and jot down or think in your head a word or a phrase that isn't a, oh, it's pretty or ugly or whatever, but a feeling or an association you have or a memory. Anybody have a thought?
Fragile power.
Fragile power.
There's always a place.
There's always a place.
Stretching.
Stretching.
Healing.
Healing. Okay, thanks. So the result of this kind of sharing is that the creator gets insight into themselves. I've actually done this exercise with my own art with other people to get ideas for titles. And to get insights into what the art is about when I'm doing something new and I don't know how to write an artist statement because I don't know what it's about. It came from my unconscious. It also, the sharing creates community. And a result that I found is that people were less fearful after making in their environment. An example of this is in Jamaica. I take a course that's art and biology, January term course. And the first time students did the trip, I just had them go out in nature and write and reflect, and some of them were scared of this, that, and the other thing. And it's their first time in the jungle, so it's kind of intimidating. But the most recent Jamaica trip, I had them do this. And people were much more comfortable at starting to investigate. Some of them were still timid and stayed on the trail and within view of others, but we did it a second time at a different place, and some of those timid people moved farther apart and more off trail, out of sight, so they became much more comfortable. And indeed, they became very attached to their sites. We had them do various things, revisiting the sites, and one of the students said, on the final day I had asked them, oh, go out to your site and do something to say goodbye before we leave. And he said, oh, I'll just go out there for 10 minutes. And he ended up being amazed that he spent at least an hour out there, maybe more. Another activity that I've done is one that came out of that experience I shared about placing the clay figure of my mother on logs. And this is one that I've done with students and I've done with the artist group, What We Need Is Here. And it begins with thinking of an animal that you identify with, and then shaping clay the size of your fist quickly with your eyes closed, a little clay sketch. And then wandering to places that feel right alone and placing the objects in spots that feel right. And one of the artists is here today, whose work is shown here. These works are made by the What We Need Is Here artist group. All of them were doing this clay work. It was an unfamiliar medium to them. And the idea is to just be spontaneous and explore what the feeling of the creature is. So how has this affected the people who have done these things? Have they become more passionate for nature through art? A few actions that college students shared with me that they took in result of the course was one of the students I had proudly told me on a weekend during the course that he had gone and rescued a spider from the bathroom, something he had never done before. He was sort of, he'd smash a spider or be kind of nervous about it. And I was really impressed by that because the ethic of care was something he had just soaked up from wandering around and looking at things and going, ooh, there's a frog, there's a spider, and learning something about their lives as we wandered around. I have never said anything about don't kill critters. I didn't formally teach any of that. I think it was that same student also said he was really excited to, after the course was over, his family was going to go to a cabin, and he had younger siblings, and he really wanted to do art activities and nature exploration with them, like we had done from the course. And in my final closing circle with both, each time I've done this particular class, students have often shared how they want to keep the feeling of the class going and the activities of the course going. And I did find after last summer a little nature installation near the start of classes that this is a summer course that it just appeared, and I was like, huh, wonder who did that. Maybe one of my students. And some students this summer were sharing some of what they did with some of their friends. Other things that students have said, one this year said, I never thought I'd be able to say I felt connected to nature, but now I can. And another said, I am for sure noticing so much more. And then a artist in the What We Need Is Here group said, the process resulted in a connectedness to both my inner self and to the land. It was a memorable day. Now I'm going to shift to the performance part of the presentation. And this expresses some aspects of my own passion for nature. I have a few props. It began with a scientific expedition. I was assisting a former honors student of mine at Hamlin University, Matt Medeiros over there, and he was studying insects that live in lava tube caves of Hawaii. And the power of those caves led me to create a new body of artwork that began with large paintings of deep spaces in Earth and expanded into the performance that I'm going to do. The performance includes my photography and paintings, storytelling, and improvisational singing. And the paintings, some of them look realistic, some not, but they're all animated, so you can tell when it's a painting because it's animated. And usually I sing at that point. So I'm going to switch here because this is a memory hogging thing. Have you ever wondered what's below your feet, deep in earth, where hidden waters flow through unlit caverns? Ever pondered your need for sleep or questioned the meanings of your dreams? Try closing your eyes. Perhaps with eyes closed, consider the darkness. Imagine total darkness deep below. Now consider with open eyes. What is your relationship to the darkness, the night? Do you take comfort in the meditative quiet or fear the unseen? Why is the darkness so compelling? What do we hope or fear to discover? To find answers requires difficult journeys into shadowlands of fears and dreams. Something draws me to these places below and within. I've entered caves throughout the world, made photos of their forms. Emerging from these depths, I've been compelled to paint and sing emotions that I've known, which mirror those I've felt exploring deep within my soul. And so, amid my photographs, you'll see my paintings animated as I speak or sing. Today, I'll tell of travels through one cave, or many. With my former student on a scientific expedition, we searched a cave for insects, tiny moths living far in deepest depths. I'll not name the place to keep the untrained from danger and to protect the cave's vulnerable creatures and formations, which may take thousands of years to build. Approaching the cave is like going back in time. Rocks formed over 400 million years ago. Here grows a fern, relict from those Devonian years when first amphibians crawled on land. At the entrance, green glows at edge of underworld. I long to linger in this green, more life-filled lush than any I've seen. And so I sing, inventing melodies new as spring. No longer lingering, I enter underground, look back at last light, and then, turning into twilight zone, search walls for insects, grazing gardens, jade with moss and microbes. A centipede flees from my light, descendant of first animals on land. Turning beyond twilight into dark, what lies below, within? I pause, hope-filled, curious, as if beginning some spiritual quest. To enter could bring transformation or annihilation of body, mind, and soul. At the threshold, hesitant, I dream paint pale cavern. In the mirrored dark, will I enter once again my first cave below the stairs, where just four I crawled, heart crushed, ripped open by the death of my 5-year-old brother, my heart's twin. Stepping through dark portal, I see marks upon the walls, human hands proclaiming home. Comforted, imagination paints roots and passageways enfolding shelter, where I might curl in mother's arms. Though she's gone now, memories of her love guide me through the dark. Fantastic world. Limestone formations accreted drip by drip, microscopic skeletons, fossils from an extinct sea. Childlike imagination plays. Do I see a centipede here, beyond all light? No, just shapes in stone. We climb over a rubble pile from ceiling collapsed how long ago? Maybe just the other day. Enter fantastic chamber like entering a dream. I wander amazed, imagining stone beings. The ancients saw in shapes of stone antelope, deer, horse, and painted contours for rituals of passage, torchlit them to life. I dream of painting animal dreams, pouring paint in layers mimicking molten stone or sediment settling in ancient seas. Here, bison, bird, or some imagined beast. I light a far wall and startle to see Buddha, Siddhartha, serene. And remember Chinese caverns, tales of Bodhidharma from a cave emerging to found Zen. And wonder that Earth's depths served as portals for so many spiritual leaders. Patriarch Abraham, cave hidden as a child. Muhammad, from a cave bringing the Quran. Jesus, cave-born, cave-buried, and from the caves of hell descending. We enter a tunnel sized for a train. Come to a T. Roots drape tunnels in 2 directions. We separate, each taking our own path to search roots for flightless moths which feed on memories of sun from trees so far yet near. Roots sway as I part and slide between, as through a woman's hair, perhaps Pele's tresses, goddess of fire, creator, whose moist breath nurtures trees above. Destroyer, did your rumbles cause the rubble fall we climbed? I trespass here and feel the fear creep down from weight of tons of stone. This is no place to think such thoughts. And so I sing to counteract my fear and call to my friend and listen for his call. Are you there? Yeah. I wander alone into what seems a one-way passage beyond the call of my companion. Slide through a slot into small chamber. Oh no. Are those dead bats? Some carry illness fatal to us. Perhaps not bats, dead leaves? If so, this chamber sometimes floods. And I hear sound of distant water. Dead bats or leaves, I need to leave. Which way did I come from? When entering, I failed to look behind. I choose one I think is right, though it doesn't seem familiar. Ah, here are the roots, Pele's hair, and here my friend, beyond a skylight overlooked before. We pass through a narrow passage and through a slit, and I step into the light in a rush of relief. All my emotions commingle: curiosity, wonder, amazement, nurturing comfort, fear, and joy. I peel off my cave-in clothes. Stand in the light, sing spontaneously, inventing melodies as I do now. questions about any or all of it?
I'm speechless. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that both Deanna and I still have our clay turtles. That was wonderful.
A couple sort of practical questions. One, do you go to caves in most of these global locations? Is that kind of a thing that you like to do? And two, is your medium, I saw one that looked kind of watercolory, but what are the other mediums?
So the first question was about, do I go to caves globally, and is that what I do? And the second was about the medium that I use. So I don't do cave research. It was a gift to have had the opportunity to be the assistant to my former student. We reversed roles. He and I had published together where he was my assistant on my research when he was an undergraduate, and then I happened to have frequent flyer miles accumulated, and he happened to need an assistant. So once I got to Hawaii, he covered me in the grant, and it was, I probably can say, safe to say, it was life-changing in terms of the direction that my art took and the degree to which it led me to integrate my art with my science, which prior to that I had kept very separate. And for a time in graduate school, in fact, I only did drawing to illustrate scientific presentations. And my major professor, my advisor said something about don't waste your time on art, you've got to do your science, which is a very common message.
Yeah.
So yes, I go to caves whenever I get the chance as sort of a hobbyist. The caving that we did in Hawaii was in places that are kept secret and that you need special permits to go in. And so I was very privileged to have a chance to do that. In China, I talked to some rock climbers. I'm a rock climber too, and I asked them where some caves were in the place that I was, and went and tried to find one cave, couldn't find that one, but stumbled onto another one. And then other times, I do go into show caves as well sometimes. They're not as fun as wild caves. I've been so busy that I haven't really hooked up with any, like Minnesota Speleological Society, the cavers. So I haven't done any hardcore caving with the cavers since my early days as an undergraduate, when I did some wild cave, one muddy little hole in New Hampshire and some sewering under the University of Massachusetts campus. But wherever I find cracks, crevices, and things, I don't go in alone usually, although I have on occasion. Usually I just go into the entrances and then make photographs and just be in the space, and sometimes I sing and explore the sounds of the space. The medium, all of the pieces that you saw in this set were acrylic paintings. I build them up with impasto, with gels. I water them down to be watercolor-like. I work on board that's recycled often. I prefer working on recycled board. I like, for larger pieces, I've used unstretched canvas, just because it's more rollable and transportable. But I also do have work that is monotype, and I do some drawings and sculptural work now as well. And when I show them, I often, when I do solo exhibitions, I create a sort of meditative space that is like a spiritual, imaginative version of caving to get at the feeling. So it's an installation art project as well. Very long answer, sorry about that.
Can I have another question? Is there time for another question?